Azasar and Mudasar, it's live. The screens are visible to all of us, and even the PowerPoint presentation is visible.
Okay.
So we are live within the small group at the
Yeah, yeah.
moment and not with the full audience.
No, no.
So the audience is actually viewing it on YouTube. So their audience will be able to see us now, and our mics are also open, so they can hear us parallel.
Mhm.
Starting now. You can watch it on YouTube live if you want. I'll send you the link. Huh? Give me a coffee too.
Good evening, everyone. So, as informed to you all today, we all are here to have a discussion or a sort of briefing on how to prepare for the new world of pharmaceutical development and manufacturing. Our speaker for today's session, Dr. Azaz Hussain sir, he has almost 4 decades of experience in industry. And with regards to his brief introduction, I would ask Mudda sir to introduce Azaz Hussain sir. Just a small brief introduction about Mudassar. He has a vast experience when it comes to QA and regulatory. Along with that, he is managing director of his own startup, which is based at Malta, Europe. He has been program director for NSF UK. He was chairman for Regulatory Affairs Committee IDMA. He was director of ISP and also chairman of Ophthalmic Committee of IPC. Mudassar, over to you.
Thank you, Dharmesh. A good evening to you, to everyone. Uh, it is my great privilege and honor to introduce a well-known global pharma personality, Dr. Ijaz Hussain, whom I call affectionately as Ijaz Bhai. I'm sure he doesn't mind. And I have had an association with him of almost 7 years now. I'll first introduce briefly about his a formal profile and maybe a few things with your permission I would like to talk about what kind of personality I found him to be. Dr. Ijaz Hussain is founder and president of his own consulting firm that he calls as Insight Advice and Solutions. So he's a consultant and advisor and mentor to corporations as well as professionals. He has had a distinguished academic background and equally distinguished career in the pharma industry and with regulatory agencies. He's pharmacy graduate from Bombay College of Pharmacy and he has done his PhD from University of Cincinnati. We all know him to be a ex-FDA regulator who became very famous and popular in the early 2000 as father of PAT. So his contribution to FDA while he was there for 10 years in different positions of increasing responsibilities that he has held. Ultimately, he was there as the director of Office of Pharmaceutical Science CEDAR from 2000 to 2005. And during this time, he made two notable contributions to the global quality systems and regulatory standards. So he was the leader of the FDA's Process Analytical Technology PAT initiative and CGMPs for the 21st century. In fact, I do recall he was invited in India to speak at that time. And at least I think 250 people attended his seminar in Mumbai at that time. So even today, his video, if we see of 2004, how relevant it is in today's time, 2020, we'll realize. So he's done really pioneering work in the field of PAT. Also, he has contributed to pharmaceutical quality systems for the 21st century. And how do we integrate ICH Q8, Q9, Q10 is something he really has done well. I have heard many people speaking on individual topics of Q8, Q9, Q10, but an integrated approach about development, risk management, and pharmaceutical quality system. If you have to listen, I have to listen to Dr. Ijaz Hussain, and I have been privileged to listen to him several times. So this is about his FDA career. Then he worked with Sandoz Germany as vice president and global head of biopharmaceutical development between 2005 and 8. There, of course, I know by my knowledge that he was the inventor of enoxaparin injection while he was working at Sandoz. Then he moved on to Philip Morris International for almost more than 3 years and worked as Chief Scientific Officer and Vice President, Next Generation Product Assessment. Then he had a small stint with one Indian company before he started with his own company. And he's also associated with his current associations, if I have to say, is associated with National Institute for Pharmaceutical Technology and Education, more popularly known as NIPT in the USA. NIPT is a non-profit academic organization funded by a research grant from the US FDA. It is dedicated to excellence in fundamental research and education in pharmaceutical science and manufacturing. Its mission is to improve human health through multi-university collaborative research by advancing quality, safety, affordability, and speed to markets of medicines. So you will know that by heart, he is a professor, he is a teacher. In fact, I forgot to mention, he also taught at university for several years before he joined the FDA. He is also associated more particularly with continuous manufacturing technology, and to name some of them, he's on the board of directors of Genesis USA, Continuous Pharmaceuticals, Applied Materials, Grade 4 Systems, and he continues to be an adjunct professor, Long Island University College Pharmacy, USA. So with this kind of background, we're really privileged to have him, that he's going to address the students here all the time. As I said earlier, he's a professor at heart, and it is evident that when Dharmesh made a program last year in India, he flew all the way from the US only to participate here and to encourage young students. So development of young students, preparing them to be future pharmacists or future leaders of the pharmaceutical industry is at the bottom of his heart, and he really goes all out to support this initiative at personal level and not at organization level. This is something, a great thing. In fact, before I close down the introduction, I recalled my first meeting with him. That was on 28th June 2014. I met him for a small dinner. And when I went back home, for whole night and the next morning, until I wrote to him, the thoughts didn't go out of my mind as to whom did I meet. And I happened to write there to him. So did I meet a scientist with golden heart, a rational thinker, a hardcore industry professional who counts achievements only by value addition, a passionate human being committed to help the society, a philosopher who lives an accomplished life with simplicity and humility, and finally a multifaceted personality who loves life and people around. So he's a real multifaceted personality, having lot of facets to his personality. But one thing is very clear: he's committed to the patient safety in the pharmaceuticals. He's committed to young professionals, and he's always there to help people who want to work for quality systems. So with this introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Ija Hussain or maybe Dharmesh to take the proceedings forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mudda sir, for the brief introduction. Azaz sir, over to you. We can start. Thanks a lot for your time on a Sunday morning, especially at 9:30 in the morning. Thanks. A great way in, especially not only last year, but this year also you agreed in, and we were in discussion since March when we were planning to travel to India. But had that been the case, probably we might have come across only a crowd of 100, 200. But here we are addressing a crowd of more than 500. So I feel that's the positive part of it. And let's take it over to a good extent. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Dharmesh. And Muddabhai, your words mean a lot, and we have been friends for 7 years. But that friendship has to help each other develop, and I think I appreciate that the most. And again, thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you, Dharmesh, for organizing this. These are difficult times. These are very difficult times. We have lost people, loved ones have passed away, many are hurting, and uncertainty is only going to increase. The next 3 months are likely to be very difficult for us. And in that context, I wanted to share some thoughts on obviously development and manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, but I want to talk about development of ourselves as professionals and professional development. And the world needs assurance in uncertainty, and we have to be part of the assurance givers, and we can only give assurance when we are self-assured, and it is difficult to be self-assured in these times. So with that context, um, I gave much thought and did a lot of preparation for this discussion, and I hope the value of that preparation gets transferred to you. Why this webinar? I think clearly unprecedented level of uncertainty in my lifetime and in many of us our lifetimes, erosion of trust, and increasing likelihood of multiple systems crumbling. Today, yesterday, I think situation in Seattle, Washington, and what's happening here, what's happening elsewhere, it's chaos. At this moment, I think it might appear trivial, but a point that I want to make here is information is not knowledge. And I think why is that in these uncertain times so critical point to make? I think is something that I want to elaborate on. Information that is not processed carefully is infectious and perhaps poses a higher risk than the pandemic. And I have seen the best of the best scientists crumble in this uncertainty. And that's the reason for the lack of trust. And with that lack of trust, the vaccines we are developing, the therapeutics we are developing will not have the benefit that they should have. And therefore, I think we have to think about providing assurance of quality, safety, and efficacy of all our products. I think the point I also want to make here is self-assurance is key. And what is self? I think this is something I've been thinking about, talking to Muddabhai and so forth, and looked at the whole issue of being self from behavioral economics to from neuroscience to constructive development theory of adult human development. And what I come to the conclusion is self is being whole, and mind and body, conscious and unconscious, to know and to believe. And wholesome or wholeness is the key hallmark of systems thinking. And if you want to improve a system and you want to have systems thinking, you need to have a holistic approach. And that's what has been missing in this uncertainty at the highest levels of the institutions that we have today. And I think that's where we can help change that. I think self-authoring is a measure and stage of human development. And as pharma professionals, I want to really hone in on that point. As professionals, we have duty to care, to provide assurance to others. And we can only do that when we are self-assured. And self-authorship at every level, at what we do, what we are responsible for, no matter how simple it is, I think is a step in that direction, and perhaps will create the butterfly effect or the fractal butterfly effect, which will start overcoming the butterfly effect of the COVID virus that we are feeling. So in that sense, COVID-19 in 2020 is an arrow of time, and we have to know where we are, and we have to write our story looking forward. Know how systems relate to human development, self-empower our own development so that we can help others develop too. And in that sense, I think I want to also explain why this is the continuation of our discussion we had in 2019. Clearly, the audience today is not the same audience we had in 2019, but I just wanted us to remember, I think that was an important discussion with the students as well as faculty and industry colleagues. Success mind matters, experience and expectations, placebo, nocebo, assurance and self-assurance, and how these things come together was the point we discussed. And how do we bring together tradition and science and roadmap to suitability and capability? Mind matters, Dilse was the topic we discussed. Statistical process control, compartment models, prediction, verification, validation, internal and external, compete or collaborate with AI, creating the Matthew effect via PharmaElite system, development of a community of knowledge. These were some of the topics we discussed. I know many of you were not there and many of you will not remember those topics. So, but I just thought it'll be useful reference point to keep that. And here are some pictures from that discussion. By the way, I think Nirali Mehta is in that picture on the top left. She gave me some comments on this presentation. Thank you, Nirali. And Dharmesh, Parizat, Munira. It was a wonderful time. When will those times return? I don't know. Will I ever be back? I don't know. So, in that context, what do I want to share with you? I think information is not knowledge. We are bombarded with information, fake news, and everything. And we have to convert that to knowledge. And we have to do some research on that. And I've been pursuing that aspect for several years. And I want to share with you how I'm researching in the real world to learn from my experience. We often forget, we count experience as number of years on a job. That's irrelevant. Experience is to feel emotions, and we never learn formally how to do that. We pick that up on our own, and experiential learning is key to professional development. And I think we have to talk about how do we process our emotions and feel so that we can convert information to knowledge correctly. And in that context, some professionals develop, but at different rates, many do not. And I think we need to understand why that is. I want to encourage you to write and share your stories looking forward, but based on and retaining the integrity of observations and data. And how can that be is what I want to talk about. I want to leave you with some practical consideration to facilitate your own development and to help others develop, particularly in the context of 21st century quality and cures, which requires us to be cognizant and provide assurance to patients in the real world. And the real world is a key, which I'll sort of describe in a minute. But the title that I have chosen for this webinar is not a question, it's a statement, but it starts with a how. How to is to know how, not to react, and to take action. Prepare is a process to develop, control reactions, and guide actions. New is recently discovered or acquired or experienced for the first time. World is the earth, its countries, peoples, their minds, and matters. Pharmaceuticals is something I want you to think about. How do you define pharmaceuticals? Pharmaceuticals are clinical evidence-based medicines that claim therapeutic outcomes in the real world to be better than placebo. Our clinical trials are supposed to be randomized controlled clinical trials with placebo control arm, placebo controlled trials. But in the real world, we don't have the placebo controls. We have all the biases, we have all those things. So how do we assure that the evidence we created in a controlled laboratory clinical condition is valid in the real world? I think is the gap that we have to fill. And we have seen the struggles with hydroxychloroquine. We have seen the struggles with remdesivir. These are reminders that the gap between clinical and real world needs to be filled. And I think we have an immediate challenge on that with respect to the therapeutics and vaccines trials that are ongoing. Development is a process of transforming utility of materials, thoughts, observations into information, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Manufacturing is making for consumer goods, contents using labor, machines, and media. And I think that's something, a point I want to make with that is research is what I do when I don't know what I am feeling, thinking, and doing. We tend to look at research very narrowly as laboratory or clinical research. I think in the real world, we have to think about real world research methodologies. We spend so much time on social media. We do lots of texting and so forth. All of that needs to be a part of our research is the point I'm making. So in that sense, I think what is the real world? Real world is where patients use our medicines. Real world is where we have challenges of abuse, adherence to prescriptions, availability, affordability, lack of assurance, and lack of authenticity. Oops. I think here is where expectancy affects the real world evidence come together. I think this is where we have to prove that our claims are valid. We can make our claims in laboratories and clinic, but the test of the pudding is in the real world, and that's where 21st century quality and cures need to be. We do research to reduce uncertainty, and we reduce uncertainty to such an extent that we are confident to approve a drug. The quality of our development, the effectiveness of our quality system is clearly important, but that has to be maintained in the context of real world. The first principle we adhere to is first do no harm. In that sense, care is research, knowledge is power, and wisdom is in practice. There have many gaps, deltas. We don't speak with one quality voice. We don't hear the voices of patients. And I think this is the gap that we have to fill, and professional development is a key aspect of that. So the point I want to make here is how do we research in the real world? And here are some of my postings on LinkedIn. And at end of every year, I started my research of the social media and my emotions associated with social media to how I experience these things in 2014 with the post on Schrodinger's cat and my journey from 2015 to 2020. And that journey has ended. And there were many posts. So if you're connected to me on LinkedIn, you would have seen that. So here is that yearly journey. I went from Schrodinger's cat and my journey from 2015 to 2020 in December of 2014. Six Blind Men, Regulatory Science, Bob's Big Idea, and Gandhi's Way Out of Hell, Goodbye 2015. Bob is Professor Robert Keegan at Harvard University, and his orders of consciousness is something that I learned in that time, and I have sort of thought about that and utilized that, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Then came the new prior knowledge roadmap for NIPT, and at 2017, a year that brought some confirmation of amazing juxtapositions, and the key feeling at that was jump, frog, jump while you can. Have you heard of the boiling frog? If you put a frog in lukewarm water, normal temperature water, and where he's comfortable, and you start heating the water slowly, you will boil the frog, because if the temperature rises slowly, the frog does not sense the temperature difference. Clearly, if you put a frog in a hot boiling water, it will jump out immediately. The boiling frog metaphor was the reminder of 2017. And 2018 came with a new vision, moving forward with Vision 2020, and end of that journey was December 2019. So when you self-author your thoughts on social media, you're exposing, making them transparent, attracting criticism, attracting peer review, and so forth. So social media can be a valuable tool. At the same time, if you're not careful with social media, it can come back to derail your development. It come back to hurt you. And so you have to be very careful. So paying attention to integrity of observation and information, I think, is key. And you can use social media positively to do that. And I have been writing chapters of my story while observing my feelings when looking back and anticipating the future. And this is available to you on my LinkedIn post. I did the same thing about 2 years ago on Facebook. That was a wonderful experience, but then I took myself off Facebook because I completed my research on Facebook. Will I end my presence on LinkedIn? Perhaps. That time might come pretty soon. So I want to go back to the Vision 2020 that I had to create rather quickly. with the process analytical technology initiative that Muddabhai talked to you about. What people often forget is the launch of the PAT initiative at FDA. The day was 11th of September 2001, where that was a turning point for the world. The workshop that FDA had planned started, but could never be completed. But then came the FDA Science Board meeting on November 16, 2001, and that's where I think we had to think about the Vision 2020. What was Vision 2020? I can see clearly now. Quality and performance by design, continuous real-time monitoring of quality, specification based on mechanistic understanding of how formulation process factors impact product performance, high efficiency and capacity utilization of our review and inspection, real-time review and inspection from Rockville, White Oak, and New Jersey district. Now that has become a reality with FDA thinking of virtual inspection. So what does this point to? Did we anticipate this? No, we didn't anticipate this. We honed in on the root cause of the issues. And when you get to the root cause, no matter what the context changes, you actually have the same solution, the right solution to work on. So as part of your registration, you should have received two papers. One that I wrote before the COVID pandemic, which was continuous from chaos to continuous improvement. That's the journey that I saw forward without anticipating the pandemic. But that's the same journey that we have to continue. And the paper which we recently wrote, In and Beyond COVID-19, I would urge you to read those papers. They're available to you, along with the paper which we had discussed in 2019 meeting that was New Prior Knowledge, 21st Century Assurance of Therapeutic Equivalence. I'm not going to go through the content of those papers, but the point there was we recognized systemic vulnerabilities, and system change was needed, was the direction we are moving. Now, we are in a situation, disorder in multiple systems, and people talk about the New World Order. Order is a system, and you have conspiracy theories and so forth. But I think if you hone down on the cause and effect relationships, there's nothing that you cannot understand. Chaos is a system is the point I want to make. And if you understand how chaos is a system, you find solutions. So you might be asking, what can I do to be self-authored? Very simple. Let's not get worried about too many things to make things complicated. One action item at the end of this is write to self. I will stop forwarding on social media, WhatsApp, until I have carefully processed whatever I'm going to forward to know and feel the force or the message on myself and those who will receive it. Self-author new and improvements to existing SOPs, protocols, plans that you are responsible to execute. I often struggle to understand that some of the biggest companies have to hire an ex-FDA consultant to write their SOPs, which is so fundamental. And that's mind-boggling to me. I think you should be writing your own SOPs at every level. Research to know why, and then commit to developing at a rate faster than the increasing complexity and chaos around you. Look, everything around you is exploding exponentially. And to survive and thrive, you have to mature and develop your selves to be able to confront that level of complexity. Looking forward, write and share your story that is based on and retains the integrity of observation and data. Dharmesh would have already sent you on email his efforts to build the community of pharmaceutical knowledge. If Dr. Parizad is on the program, and she's the audience, we started the AAPS Mumbai chapter community of knowledge discussion. So those activities should really be revived. And I want to re-emphasize that some reflection on self-authorship. Passing a test or an exam is necessary, but not sufficient to be self-authored. And when I look back at a picture of myself at the final year B Farm in Mumbai, I said, what could we have done differently? How about improving or writing a laboratory procedure instead of just following the listed steps uh, and if the yield did not come out right, to steal some from your partner to at least get the yield, because we do laboratory experiments in schools, colleges, just cut and paste, follow the instructions. When we are in school, when we are in college, we should be learning to write those SOPs, write those procedures, and not just following procedures. So teachers on this program, please change your teaching style and make students learn how to write. This is my granddaughter, and she is being self-authored. She made the first cake by writing her own recipe and doing it herself, and she's even writing stories now. So I think this is something is not complicated. We ignore it. It should start early, and it really should progress from that point on. I wish somebody had reminded me that I should write the procedures when I was in pharmacy school. I wish I have done that. It came later on, but I think the grandkids are now doing that before they even get to school. So the weakest link, I think, many of the challenges professional development. And I think before the COVID, we were already in over our head. Pani sar se upar tha. And how will the situation be? Everything is exploding exponentially. The former commissioner of FDA was telling, don't worry about the quality, just take, even if it's a red pill or blue pill. I reminded him he needed to take the red pill to wake up. The Institute of Medicine has been tracking the lack of professional development in the US education system for physicians and the amount of errors they were making, and they concluded that the continuing education system for US physicians, which are licensed, which have internship, has utterly failed. And they in 2018 concluded that we need design thinking and systems approach to training physicians in the US. Why? Medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the US. Now, if Johns Hopkins is right, we have 250,000 people dying of medical errors. Why did we not lock down the medical system? And we locked down for COVID. So this is the irrationality that we see. And the most trained, the most coveted, licensed professionals can't even follow a checklist. And people die. So this is the reality of the education and system that we have today. The same situation for pharmaceutical professionals. We have to improve our education and training on technical matters, on engineering matters, on statistics. And Nirali Mehta, if you're listening, I think one of the simplest things you can do is make sure the pharmaceutical professionals understand the difference between type 1 and type 2 errors. The fiasco, the debacle of for testing for COVID, and this is amazing that we would be in a situation there where we don't have measurement certainty of something that is so fundamental. They are not alone. Take dissolution test. If Professor Mala Menon is on the line, I wrote an article for her paper recently, and we still struggle with type 1, type 2 errors for dissolution test or compendial test. We still don't understand that compendial tests are for market standards, and their built-in error rate is built in. So technically, every batch can be out of specification, the way we do things, and we don't get to the root cause. So these are fundamental statistical considerations that we go wrong. So the shock to me was the entire nation's institutions would not get that right in this case. So there is something common in this aspect. So one aspect that what I learned was in 2005, when I was talking about building, the nation needs a comprehensive pharmaceutical engineering education and research system, I was thinking more mechanistic. I was thinking about engineering system. What changed my mind was, no, these are all human systems. So these are ecological systems, and systems thinking is a stage in adult human development. And this is something that we don't account for in our training, in our professional development. And education, training, and experience, although required by regulations, required by law, we have never defined what is adequate education, training, and experience. And this is a gap that we have to fill. So there are unverified assumptions in the US regulatory programs, such as that, which we are trying to fill now. To give assurance to others, one must first be self-assured. A good practitioner at minimum should be self-authored at their current level of responsibility. So let me just think about validation. Validation has to be personal, professional, and at the policy level. Action taken, the action of making or declaring something legally or officially acceptable has to be science-based. And pharmaceutical process validation has been moving towards statistical process control, which is, we're not there yet. Action of checking and proving validity or accuracy of something is so fundamental, and the best of the institutions are making mistakes right now. Recognition or affirmation that a person or their feelings or opinions are valid is something I'm focused on. So validation has to be 3-2-1 in that sense. So chaos was already there. So if I look back in 2017, the Bloomberg ran the headline, US generic drug market in chaos, Indian upstarts rise. Generic pill color may affect medication adherence. Placebo effects, nocebo effects happening in the real world. Fed up with companies, hospitals decide to start their own. Now this is expanding, by the way. So we just had a huge funding. You will hear more funding coming to bringing manufacturing back to US. Continuous manufacturing is the way to go, because why? Because the old system was not reliable. And in that sense, the important message I want to share with you is know your systems, and know what is good in one system may not be good in another system. So think about cause and effect relationships. When you think about cause and effect relationships, how easy it is to judge or to establish cause and effect relationship is the way to define different systems. A simple system is one in which cause and effect relationships are self-evident. Here we go for best practices. Best practices means a practice developed in one institution can be transferred without any additional consideration. When cause and effect relationships require expertise, education, training, and experience, such as in the pharmaceutical sector, we call those good practices. These are complicated systems where cause and effect relationships are not self-evident, but require additional considerations such as expertise, education, and training. When cause and effect relationships are unknown or can only be known after the fact, where we have to do experiments, that's research and development. We call that a complex system. When cause and effect relationships are not predictable because the system exhibits extreme sensitivity to initial conditions, and the system exhibits patterns which are often called strange attractors, that's called chaotic system. This is where innovation occurs. This is where butterfly effect happens. But this is where also cheating by design occurs. This is where jugaad occurs. So this is chaos means freedom to do what you want, anarchy. But chaos is a system which is not just entropy or randomness or disorder. There are attractors within that that give emerges patterns. There is a butterfly effect. Sensitivity to initial conditions is important. And marketing authorization plus good practices provides us basis for dealing with complexity, reducing complexity in R&D to manufacturing to have good practices, and for safety, best practices. But now we are in a chaotic system. Emergency use authorizations and other aspects have to be considered, but that brings up high degree of uncertainty. We often make errors of omission and commission in complicated and simple systems, but here we make our errors have significant consequences. So in that sense, I want to hone in on there can be no knowledge without emotion. Until we have felt the force of the knowledge, it is not ours. The challenge we have now is in chaos, how to process information and emotions to feel the power of knowledge. We are in chaos because the initial conditions, sensitivity to initial conditions. Is this virus coming from a research program in Chinese laboratory? When did it come to America? We don't have, plus we don't have measurement certainty. And we have to develop vaccines, and we are in an age of entropy. Uh, and, and, and most of the early clinical development are poorly designed. So the important point I want to make here is information is entropy from physics that we know. We already knew this. But put that in the human context. Knowledge is power, information is entropy. Remember, there can be no knowledge without emotion. Until we have felt the force of knowledge is not ours. So if I think about this in this sense, if I take the habit of practice of sharing text and forwarding things on WhatsApp, uh, what we forward, how we forward is a reflection of our professional development, of our maturity. I found this nice figure on internet. I don't know who wrote that, so it's anonymous from me. Uh, are we in the fear zone? Are we in the learning zone? Are we in the growth zone? Growth and development, I distinguish very, very specifically. Economic growth focuses on GDP. Economic development focus on human development index. Much of in everything, we are all focused on GDP and economic growth. We ignore or we assume human development will occur on its own. It's time to put human development up front. And every time you use WhatsApp, every time you use Instagram, Facebook, anytime you post, you have a means to measure your order of consciousness, your stage of development, your maturity, and what you do. So I think about that. I'll skip a few things because I don't want to take on a bit more. You have this slide. These slides have been posted on my LinkedIn and on SlideShare. So please download this. So I was just going to illustrate to you how my posting and my reflection becomes research, so that I can process my emotions and capture my learning and share my learning. The point I want to make here is introduce a simple tool for you to think about. And that simple tool is something I've been thinking about for a long time. How do I bring the two parts in me, the Eastern and the Western aspects in me, the traditional, the wisdom traditions in India and the scientific rigor, how do I bring them together? Dilse has been something I've been very much focused on. And in that sense, given the chaos, given the uncertainty, the first question is, where do I start? And the answer comes to consciousness. Now, consciousness can be a difficult term. It is in our wisdom tradition, but now it is in science, in quantum physics. How is this going to come together is going to be an interesting aspect, and that's something we can learn together. But I'm going to use that in a very practical term. I'm positioning consciousness in the context of most data is, in one word, unreliable. And the reason for that, Gandhiji had said this, but Frederick Donaldson, in his sermon at Westminster Abbey in 1925, said that science without humanity, commerce without morality, wealth without work, politics without principle, worship without sacrifice, and on, are the reason for the challenges that he saw in 1925. Perhaps now exponentially the challenge is higher. So quickly, I wrote about consciousness first time on December 29, 2015 in my post on LinkedIn, Six Blind Men and Regulatory Science and Bob's Big Idea and Gandhi's Way Out of Hell. And that's the solution we need now. What is consciousness? It is inner sense of awareness, to be as in being. It is what we know best and explain least. It juxtaposes quantum physics with wisdom traditions from Vedanta to the Quran. So it's a common theme that we can come together on. But 4 years later, in December 2019, I reaffirmed this conclusion, and I think I want to share with you a very practical solution, a simple tool. How do I know am I being a good practitioner at any given moment? At any given moment, if I can simply feel my emotion, am I being a nasty, selfish person who wants to hate somebody, the procrustes, or I'm just wishing to look good and I'm feeling bad because I'm not looking good, or I just want to go with the flow of being good, or I am confident, I want to do good, I want to push back and make sure everybody does good, or I have the compassion to be able to see good in every level of development. So compassion, sympathy, empathy, pity also relate to this. Pity, sympathy, and empathy and compassion are the stages of also development in that sense. Professor Keegan came out with his orders of consciousness, and his stages of development, adult human development, is imperialist, socialist, self-authored mind, self-transforming mind. And what I argue is, as professionals, we need to be self-authored at every stage. We cannot just be being good, going with the flow, chalta hai, that doesn't work anymore. Because that level of consciousness leads to tribal passions, communal violence, and so forth. So that's where I think we get stuck. But professionals have to do good and have to be self-authored, actually by law. The aggregate order of consciousness in a democratic society may relate to how it secures inalienable rights of its citizens and protects their rights to pursue interests that do no harm to others. So right versus wrong, good versus evil, first principles, first do no harm, and the basis of validation, process validation control, the basis of judging something valid as well as judging something to be scientific, all can be reconciled and integrated. Adult human development can continue to occur in multiple dimensions, such as cognitive, inter and intrapersonal proficiencies, spiritual dimensions, and so on and so forth. This simple tool is intrapersonal proficiency. I can judge, measure my own order of consciousness anytime I want, when I'm texting, when I am talking to you, and so forth. So that's something I want you to think about. Quality is doing right when only the one is looking. Now, the one is not capital. If it was capital, I would have called. If I'm working alone, I'm the only one who is judging myself. But I have to develop quality and make sure I do quality work even when no one else is looking. Are your thoughts and actions to look good, or are you being good, or are you determined to do good? I think is something you need to think about. So know your order of consciousness and be suitable and capable in all systems. To understand why and how, in the pandemic, I must more clearly feel emotions to know how they correlate or cause my development to continue or retard, to find ways and means to help other professionals develop. So I'll sort of start ending my talk. Imagine what if our stories are based on and retain the integrity of our observations. What we know about storytelling is the best leaders, almost without exception, at every level, are master users of stories and symbols. Stories are the creative conversion of life itself into more powerful, clearer, more meaningful experience. They are the currency of human contact, and we need that human contact now. Uh, if I look at the NDTV picture that I put together, how will malls ensure SOPs are not violated? And here is a point I want to make. If you go to the US FDA website on GMP, FDA says you must adhere to the regulations, not comply. You comply to your own SOPs, your own corporate policies. And the best way to comply to your SOP or corporate policy is to self-author those yourself, not have consultants write that or somebody else write that, because complying with what somebody else does is very difficult. But now the challenge is, how will the public do this? Now, in a chaotic system, to control a chaotic system, you have to change the initial conditions or improve the initial conditions, which is too late now. Unfortunately, the other way of controlling in chaos is drawing a line in the sand. Line in the sand can be very brutal. I think lines in the sands are being drawn, and one of the consequences of that is war. So let me end my talk, ending this chapter of my story to remind you to imagine the future you wish and self-author your story looking forward and accounting for how you feel now to know and not just be informed. um, do so with integrity of your observation and data. Care is research, knowledge is power, and wisdom is in practice. I have included a number of slides which you can download as additional information. And I'll stop here and see if, where Dharmesh wants to go next. Dharmesh, back to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for insights into all the different domains. Thanks a lot for the connecting part of 2019 and 2020, and of course, an idea on the post COVID scenario. And the best part of it about being SOP as well, that it should be self authored any day since you are the one who has worked on to it. So, taking forward, we can move to Q&A part of it. Anyone, you can post your questions in the chat box and we can take at least 5 questions now. So Azaz sir and Munta sir, they both can parallelly get your queries cleared. So any questions, any queries are welcomed. Anyone, any queries, any questions from your side?
So, Mudha Bhai, you have any question? Maybe we can.
We can see the first questions in the chat box, Azaz sir. It says how we can see industry academic collaborations going forward.
Sorry, I'm not able to see the chat, so my apology. So I can't see anything
No
you
worries,
mentioned.
sir. I'll repeat the question. The
Okay.
question says, how do we see industry academia collaboration going forward?
I think the three things that I think we have to factor in. I think the supply chains have to be secured again, and the gaps and weaknesses in the supply chain have to be fixed. And clearly, I think the divide between US and China creates a very different scenario. So bringing a focus on bringing essential manufacturing back to US is very significant, highly funded. Most of us are working on that. And I think API, integrated API, raw materials API, and product manufacturing is a key. And India has to be a significant contributor, increase its contribution to be the pharmacy to the world. This is an opportunity. But where we are going is more reliable, statistically valid manufacturing, and therefore education in terms of material science, flow chemistry, API manufacturing, as well as engineering aspect for continuous manufacturing are the education training and education training components that have to expand. And so industry, academia have to come together to set the curriculum and to define, because I'm not sure we have in academia all the necessary talent. So I think industry experts will have to join hands with academia to fill that gap. I think professional development of what people call soft skill or experiential development is going to be key. So internships and residencies and experiential opportunities have to be created for students. I think as a pharmacy student, I had the internship program, which was very valuable, but that has to be expanded to be much more meaningful, much more hands-on, and much more experiential. Are two opportunities. And third one really is a community of knowledge, people coming and sharing, writing stories, learning to write stories which are true to the observations and data, and sharing stories is a knowledge transfer that industry, academia, has to come together to do that in a community of knowledge. I hope that helps.
So the next question goes this way. What is your take with regards to hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine in the COVID scenario? Like it has already failed, but at many cases it is still under practice. Many health practitioners are still using it in prophylaxis. So how do we take that into account ahead?
No, I think the randomized control clinical studies that were needed for that drug to establish once and for all its effectiveness and so forth, and based on the mechanisms of its action, including the combination with zinc and others that have to be there, those studies have not adequately been done. So the conclusions have been going like a pendulum from one to the other, and it is unsettled. So here, I respect a physician's right to do what they think is best, and so in my mind, I haven't seen one where the evidence this is done deal and so forth. There's still uncertain there.
The next point question says with regards to SOPs, right now SOPs are not part of academics. The regulators must implement them based on the industry recommendations. So what do you suggest a way forward for that?
No, no. See, let's define SOP. It's a standard operating procedure. It's a procedure, right?
Yes, sir.
Any laboratory we do for medicinal chemistry or compounding pharmacy or whatever, BPharm 1, 2, 3. Mine was the 3-year program. So each year we had a laboratory, right? There's a procedure. So we can learn to write those procedures. Those are SOPs. So change your definition mindset about what SOP is. SOP is a standard operating procedure. My granddaughter wrote her cake recipe based on what she heard on YouTube and wrote her own procedure. So this is nothing complicated. You simply have to make sure that given a set of starting conditions, if you follow the procedures, that means you're compliant with the instructions given in that, you should end with the expected results. If given the set of starting conditions, you follow the procedure, you don't get that SOP is not valid. So make sure you validate that SOP. That's what SOP is, nothing complicated about it.
Okay. And sir, one important question, like it's not exactly related to this situation, but when we take into account the years of changes what you have seen in the past, you and Mudda sir both, I guess it's almost 3 to 4 decades for both of you. You have seen the pharma industry right from their base. You have seen it changing over the decades, and based on that, how dynamic it has been. What do you think would be the future aspect? Something like if you have got a chance that will move back 4 decades from now, have you might have done all the same steps the way it went in the past 4 decades, or maybe it might have been something additional as well?
I'll request Mudda Bhai to take on that first. Mudda Bhai?
It's just I'm not able to hear Dharmesh so well.
Okay.
Your voice is breaking.
I, I'll repeat, sir. I just said that if we go back 40 years from now or 30 years from now, when you started with your career in pharmaceutical industry, and you have seen the dynamics of pharmaceutical industry, how it has evolved over the decades, where Indian pharmaceutical industry was, where the global pharmaceutical industry was, and where it stands presently. So if given a chance to go back 30 to 40 years from now, you might have followed the same path, or it might have been something different.
Let me answer that.
I was still not able to hear you well, but if I've understood, I mean, it's really broken your statement. So, are you trying to say that
Let me take on Mutabai.
compared to the last 40 years? Sorry.
No, let me answer that so that uh, look, Dharmesh, I think growth and development of any society is progresses. So looking back and answering that question is not possible. It won't be objective or evidence based because my memories there are not reliable. So I'm not going to answer that question in that sense. What Where we are, I think, is that we have to understand systems and we have to reduce uncertainty, and we have to improve predictability. So anybody who is coming out of schools now, if they are not prepared to have the quantitative skill set, the mathematics, the quantitative skill set in engineering and statistics, will have a disadvantage. They have to compete with AI. So artificial intelligence is coming on so strong, and anything which can be an algorithm or a SOP, if the artificial intelligence will do better than that of human anytime. What we need people now is to be able to write those SOP that artificial intelligence can be used to automate things and to have reliable mathematical modeling and validation of those modelings, not what happened now, and statistical rigor. So basic and multivariate statistics, statistical analysis, pattern recognition, and big data, along with the quantitative tools, would be fundamental. And that's what we need in our education program today. Would be what I suggest.
And if we like the present academic syllabus is not as per industry demands exactly. So bringing reforms onto that, bringing onto the factors like how it can be changed, or else if it's like it's not in our hand to modify syllabus when it comes to autonomous colleges or any universities, then what extra things do you feel should be a
No,
part of
no, so no, you're
academic?
absolutely right. See, why am I spending time to help you build a community of knowledge? Because the academic programs, the curriculum changes are at least 20 years behind where they need to be. So that system has been ineffective for decades. So I'm not even looking at academia to be able to fill the gap. I'm looking at entrepreneurs like yourself, PharmaElite, or I'm just became an advisor to Immersive, Indian company on knowledge management. I just became their advisor. The solutions will have to come from the private source, such as yourself, building community of knowledge. The education system runs 20 years behind the world. So I don't expect any big solutions coming from that system now.
Thank you so much. Next question says, what will be the challenges faced by India if it decides to manufacture API in-house, which are being currently imported from other countries?
I don't have the. I'm not an API expert, so I would defer that question to somebody else. So
And with regards to clinical
Unfortunately, I'm
trials
not
for
able to
any
hear
upcoming,
the question well.
okay,
Mutabai, go ahead.
is it with regards to any upcoming vaccines or APIs, which would be suggestive of a repurposive drug for this COVID situation? So the clinical trial should follow their usual way, or it should be cut short looking at the need of the industry. Like we just went straight away with hydroxychloroquine to a good extent, which at some point found to be wrong. So for upcoming repurposed drugs, should we go the same way, or should we follow the usual clinical trials and the entire protocol?
Let me again. I'm not the expert in that area, so I'll answer as a patient, or one who has to take that. So I will need to be convinced that the safety and efficacy and the benefit and risk are in my favor. I'm not going to take anything without being convinced myself. So that's where I think every pharma professional needs to be, is convince me. If you cut corners, if you go rapid, sorry, that's not acceptable anymore to me.
Mudda sir, you want to add on to anything? If we are audible in case? I guess there are some audio issues on that side. Thank you so much, sir. We don't see any questions in the chat box. So thanks a lot for deep insight onto all the possible changes which we can expect in post-COVID with regards to development. Big thanks for the SOP part of it. This is something what we usually follow for the things available in the public domain. We don't write something of our own. We majority of the times tend to follow what is already available in the public domain.
Dharmesh,
Thanks
that's
a
an
lot for
important point. Just on to
yes,
close on that, cut and paste. I can have AI do cut and paste, and I don't need humans for that. Okay.
right. Thanks a lot, sir. Those who are waiting for the feedback form link, I'll post it in the chat box in some time again. I've already posted it. You can submit your feedback form. It is also asking if you want to be a part of community of pharmaceutical knowledge. So you can keep posted about that particular thing as well. Yes, we can go ahead with the question. We see one question from Pharma Stats. So I suppose it might be Nirali ma'am with us. Yes, Pharma Stats.
My request is, I think I posted this on my LinkedIn also, and I think please connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can also send me an email, and I can answer your questions that way, or unless the Dharmesh has another way that we can collect
Sure.
other questions and see. But remember, if it's not my area of expertise, I will answer the question as a patient or a public person, and not as an expert. So I tend to be careful on that. So if my area of expertise, certainly I'll answer that as an expert. But otherwise, my answer would be as a patient or as a public member of the public.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your patience listening. Thank you so much, Mudda sir, for the brief introduction and being a part of this great event. We'll keep connecting industry and academia together in the upcoming times as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Muddabai. Thank you, Dharmesh. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.